looked like a normal parcel drop. A white van pulls up outside a quiet semi in West Derby. One man walks to the door, dressed like a courier. 3 others follow in balaclavas. What happens next lasts just 4 minutes, but leaves a man soaked in blood and £1 million of cocaine gone. The stash house belonged to one of Merseyside's most violent crime syndicates, the Huyton Firm. At its head, Vincent Coggins, a man known for torture, blackmail, and disappearances. The man inside kept quiet, but word was already moving. Someone, somewhere, knew exactly what had just been taken, and what it would cost to get it back. Because when the wrong name got whispered into the wrong ear, a father stepped forward with everything he had. This is the story of a man who paid £1.3 million to save his son from a murder he never ordered, and the criminal empire that took the money but still wanted blood. It started with a plan. 4 men, a white van, one posing as a delivery driver. The others waited, masked and armed. They'd been watching the house on Croxdale Road West in West Derby for weeks. They knew what was inside. Not people, but $1 million worth product. At 9:30 a.m. on 23rd May 2020, they moved. The front door was answered by Paul Glynn and his son. Within seconds, machetes were drawn. Glynn was slashed down to the bone. The son tried to hold them back. He failed. Blood was everywhere. The house had no signs, no branding. But for those who knew, it was a stash house, a depot, and today it was being emptied. The men loaded up 30 kilograms of cocaine, worth over £1 million, and vanished. What they didn't know, this house wasn't just any drop point. It belonged to the Huyton Firm, a Merseyside cartel built over decades by brothers Vincent and Francis Coggins. Their supply lines stretched from South America to Spain to the UK, and someone had just stolen from them. By 7:41 that evening, Coggins was watching the footage, CCTV pulled from a neighbour's system, 4 masked men, a van waiting, and just like that, his stock disappeared. He exploded. He told associates the attack was personal, that no local crew would dare touch him, that this was an inside job, someone cocky enough to think they could rob the Huyton Firm and live. He wanted names. Now, but the robbers weren't from Liverpool. Jason and Craig Cox, 2 brothers from Salford, had teamed up with Richard Caswell, a seasoned local criminal. The 4th man, Ben Monks-Gorton, was the decoy delivery driver. Coggins didn't know that yet. The men who actually did it were already offloading the drugs. And the Huyton Firm was about to go hunting for the wrong man. Vincent Coggins didn't hesitate. He wanted retribution. Within hours, Coggins was on EncroChat, using the handle moonlit boat. His tone was measured, but the words were lethal. He told Paul Woodford, Robert Jarvis, and Michael Earl to start digging. If they couldn't find out who took the drugs, they'd burn down every rumour until someone confessed. The first name floated, Kenny Glynn, the stash house victim's son. Then Paul Flynn. Then silence. Then a shift. Out of nowhere, Coggins fixated on another local dealer, Brian Maxwell Jr. No link, no motive, no presence at the scene. Maxwell Jr. wasn't unknown. Young, calculated, and always close to his father, operated discreetly. In Coggins's eyes, that was enough. He turned to EncroChat, sent messages laced with violence. He claimed he had Maxwell nailed and made it clear the stolen money no longer mattered. What he wanted now was blood. When Woodford asked if weapons were needed, Coggins responded that he'd already stocked up. They were ready, armed and waiting. He asked for a pineapple, street code for a hand grenade. Jarvis confirmed one could be sourced. They were no longer just guessing, they were arming up. The plan was simple: locate Maxwell Jr., hit him fast, and make an example. Brian Maxwell Sr. wasn't a name the public knew, but in the drug world, his reputation was solid. A quiet operator, no crew, no chaos, just houses, dozens of them. bought cheap, rented out, and fitted with everything needed for large-scale cannabis grows. Lights on timers, lawns mowed weekly. Gardeners paid to plant hanging baskets outside just to make them look lived in. Inside, it was a different world. Upstairs floors stripped bare, walls packed with grow tents, heat lamps carefully shielded. Downstairs, furnished to keep up appearances. Every detail accounted for, right down to the empty driveways with planted cars. It wasn't showy, but it was efficient. And it paid. His son, Brian Maxwell Jr., had grown up around it, or understood the trade, trusted with it. By 2020, the two were working closely, quietly handling supply, moving product, and communicating either face-to-face or through encrypted devices. But when Maxwell Sr. heard his son's name come up in whispers, as the man behind a £1 million stash robbery he knew his boy hadn't touched, something shifted. He demanded proof from his son. Maxwell Jr. had it. CCTV showing he hadn't left the house that day. Footage, time-stamped, clear. Still, the threat didn't ease. Coggins didn't care, because the name had stuck in their minds. And now there was a price on his son's head. So Maxwell Sr. made a decision. He knew Coggins, knew how men like him worked. A deal could be made, if the price was right. He told his son to stay hidden and began negotiations through a mutual associate. His offer was simple: land, house, and cash. Over £1.3 million in exchange for his son's life. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. He wasn't trying to settle scores. He was just trying to keep his son breathing. The proposal reached Vincent Coggins through an intermediary. Brian Maxwell Sr. wanted a meeting, or at least a message passed. He knew his son hadn't robbed the stash house. He had the footage to prove it, but he also knew that truth didn't matter anymore. He told the gang to treat it as payment in full. From that point on, he'd carry the blame himself. Coggins agreed, on paper at least. The handover was made, titles transferred, money passed. On the 3rd of June 2020, the transaction was completed. But behind the scenes, Coggins was still venting rage across EncroChat. He told his inner circle that he'd accepted the deal, but that nothing had changed. Maxwell Jr. was still marked. He just wouldn't rush it. Not with police watching. In one message, he said the dad could be left alone. For now. But his plan was to return when things cooled off and finish what had started. Maxwell Jr., unaware of the ongoing threat, remained in hiding. And his father, still believing he'd bought peace, stayed quiet. Never once tried to recover the money. But the streets kept moving. In the background, the machinery of revenge kept turning, because in the Huyton Firm's world, debt could be paid. But disrespect, even imagined, had to be punished. So far, we've seen the fury, the threats, the deal that should have ended it. But to understand why that deal was never going to hold, you need to understand who the Coggins brothers really were. Not just angry men, but architects of one of the most violent and structured crime groups Merseyside has ever seen. Long before the raid, before the payout, and before EncroChat collapsed the walls, the Huyton Firm had already earned its place near the top. It began on the Cantrell Farm estate, Merseyside, a place gutted by the collapse of industry and flooded with poverty. In that vacuum, something else took root. The Coggins brothers, Vincent and Francis, learned early that power didn't come from status, it came from fear. Over the next 3 decades, they built an empire. At its peak, the Huyton Firm was a nationwide network. Cocaine and heroin moved from Spain into Liverpool, then up to Scotland, down to Plymouth. Messages on EncroChat showed deals involving over 140 kilograms of cocaine and nearly 250 kilograms of heroin in just 3 months. The real numbers were likely higher, but the drugs were just the surface. What held the firm together was violence. There were men on salary to do damage. One of them, Thomas Cashman, would later be convicted of killing 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Others were used as enforcers, couriers, handlers, all kept in line by a chain of command that ran straight to the brothers. Vincent handled Merseyside. Francis, believed to be operating from the Costa del Sol, oversaw European logistics. Their associates included Paul Woodford, a man linked to past shootings, and Robert Jarvis, a long-standing fixer with international contacts. The brothers operated with layers, rarely seen, never careless. When they did speak, it was through encrypted handles: Moonlit Boat, Soft Herb, King Wasp. Personal photos, location tags, and digital footprints would later unmask them. To their rivals, they were untouchable. To their own people, they were feared. But like all long-standing syndicates, it wasn't paranoia that brought them down. It was confidence, the belief that no one was watching, and a phone network they thought couldn't be broken. In early April 2020, French and Dutch authorities quietly hacked into the network. Without alerting users, they copied messages in real time, including thousands sent by the Coggins brothers and their crew. That intelligence was passed directly to the UK's National Crime Agency and the Northwest Regional Organised Crime Unit. From that moment, everything changed. Over 72,000 messages were gathered from what became known as Operation SubZero. Every threat, every deal, every plan. The NCA didn't just sit on it, they moved methodically. Each message was matched with metadata, locations, timestamps, even background photos. Handles like Moonlit Boat, Soft Herb, Olive Scooter, and Blade Hedge were slowly tied to real identities. Often the crew made it easy, joking about food, swapping photos, and talking too casually about their daily lives. What started as a surveillance operation became a live intelligence feed. As the firm continued planning hits, the police were quietly building cases. Threats against Brian Maxwell Jr. and two others, Michael Eves and Ayabosa Igbenovia, were tracked in real time. By late May 2020, the threat wasn't just words. The plan was real. Inside the Northwest Regional Organised Crime Unit, detectives made a call. This couldn't wait for an arrest phase, not if someone was about to be killed. So they moved first. On 27th May 2020, police arrived at Maxwell Jr.'s home. He was served with an Osman warning, an official document telling him his life was in danger. Officers did the same for the two others Coggins had named. Then came the other half of the strategy. Coggins, Woodford, Earl, and Jarvis were served with disruption notices, formal warnings from law enforcement making it clear you're being watched, and if you act, you'll be taken down. It was meant to stall the plot. And for a moment, it did. Michael Earl appeared to back off, unnerved by the increasing pressure. But Coggins wasn't done. Behind the scenes, officers ramped up surveillance. The goal wasn't just to disrupt, it was to finish building the case. As the firm tried to outweight the police, the investigation moved into its final phase. The arrests were coming. They just had to happen before someone got killed. For weeks, the firm had been hunting the wrong men. But the men who actually stole the drugs? They were already gone. As discussed earlier, the roles of Jason and Craig Cox and Richard Caswell. It was Caswell who tipped them off. He spoke to the firm, pretending he didn't know who was behind it. Claimed he was trying to find out. In truth, he was feeding their fears back to the Cox crew, keeping them ahead of any retaliation. For a while, it worked. But then, the EncroChat data came through. Caswell's own messages, captured by Operation Venetic, revealed his role in setting up the robbery. Police confirmed he'd been in contact with the Cox brothers before and after the hit. He wasn't a bystander. He was the inside man. That evidence spread in all of the circles. In that retaliation, Caswell, who was already arrested in another case, was attacked inside prison, slashed across the face. The Cox family were issued threat-to-life warnings. There were arson attacks at properties in Salford. Jason and Craig Cox both fled to Spain. By the time Coggins realized the truth, the damage was done. And now the firm's focus wasn't just on revenge. It was on survival. The case was ready. Every message, every photo, every order is traced and stored, a full blueprint of how the Huyton Firm operated. The takedown was set in motion under the codename Operation SubZero, the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit's part of the wider EncroChat response. At 6 a.m. on the 16th of June 2020, the first doors came off. Armed raids across Liverpool and Knowsley led to the arrests of Vincent Coggins, Robert Jarvis, Paul Woodford, and Michael Earl. Days later, Paul Fitzsimmons, Kevin Rimmer, Dean Burrows, and Darren Tierney followed. In Amsterdam, after 2 years on the run, Paul Glynn was arrested and extradited, along with Brian Maxwell Sr. and Jr. both captured as well. The arrests were silent, no warning, no headlines. The firm was dismantled in real time. Over the next year, charges were filed, trials were scheduled, guilty pleas came in waves. The court heard how the firm had trafficked hundreds of kilos of heroin and cocaine across the UK, used hand grenades as bargaining tools, and planned executions over dropped profits. More than 72,000 messages were analysed and linked to real-world activity, from property transfers to weapons buys. It was the first time this volume of EncroChat data had been tested in UK courts. The defence tried to have it thrown out, but they failed. The judges ruled it admissible, setting a precedent that would impact hundreds of other EncroChat cases across the country. The Coggins brothers, once untouchable, were now front-page criminals. One in custody, one still abroad, and the network they'd spent 3 decades building collapsed. It took over 3 years to bring the case to full conclusion. Dozens were arrested, some fought the charges, others pleaded early. But once the EncroChat evidence held up in court, the outcomes were inevitable. Vincent Coggins, 58, received 28 years. The court heard how he directed violence and multi-kilo drug deals across the UK, all from behind an encrypted screen. Robert Jarvis, 59, once thought to be just an enforcer, was shown to be central to the gang's operations. He received 25 years following a full trial. Paul Woodford, 58, was handed 24 years and 6 months. Evidence showed he was ready to source firearms, arrange attacks, and handle bulk cocaine shipments. Michael Earl, 48, received 11 years. Alongside him, Paul Fitzsimmons, 60, got 12 years and 6 months, while Darren Tierney, 46, received 12 years and 9 months. Kevin Rimmer and Dean Burrows received 16 years and 14 years, 3 months, respectively. Paul Glynn, 59, the man who managed the stash house that was robbed, received 11 years and 2 months for conspiracy to supply cocaine. Those responsible for the actual robbery, Jason Cox, Craig Cox, Richard Caswell, and Ben Monks-Gorton, were jailed under Operation Jailer D, led by Greater Manchester Police. Jason received 14 years and 8 months. Craig's sentence was reduced from 13 years and 6 months to 11 years on appeal. Caswell was handed 7 years. Monks-Gorton received just under 7, then came the Maxwells. Brian Maxwell Sr., the man who paid the ransom, was jailed for 13 years for conspiracy to supply cannabis. His son, Brian Maxwell Jr., was handed 18 years and 2 months, mostly for firearm offences. The court heard he'd sourced an AR-15 and an AK-47 while in hiding, fearing the hit was still coming. The £1.36 million Maxwell Sr. gave to the firm was never returned. Now seized under the Proceeds of Crime Act, it may never be. If you followed this case all the way through, we want to hear what you think. Did the sentences fit the crimes? Was justice served? Or did some get off lightly? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real UK crime stories like this, subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a like. There's always another case to uncover.